Hi everyone, my name is Mevish and you're listening to this episode of Hand the Mic Over. Today is going to be a very different interview because this is our first ever group interview. Without further ado, could each of you please go ahead and introduce yourselves?
My name's Kyle. I'm 21 years old, and both my parents are from Filipino background.
My name's Andrew, and both my parents are from Iraq, and I'm 20 years old.
Hi, my name's KJ. I'm from Guyana and Jamaica.
Hello, my name is Marcus. I'm very happy to be here. I'm 21. My mother's from Italy, and my father's from a small Caribbean island called St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Okay, so we have a very diverse group here today. What's your connection to Toronto or the GTA?
So I'll start. I lived in Brampton my whole life. Been around Toronto in most areas of the GTA. Went to school in Hamilton, which is outside the GTA. So I got to experience a little bit of both the culture within the GTA and a little bit outside of the GTA.
For me, I've been around 3 different places. So I was born in Toronto, and then moved to Mississauga, and then I moved to Brampton for the rest of my life, from grade 4 to now.
My story is, I pretty much grew up in Brampton my whole life. So I have relatives that live in Etobicoke, that part of Toronto.
I was born in Mississauga, and I lived there until grade 2 when I was around 7. After that, I moved to Brampton, and I've been living there since. But my father's business was based in Toronto, near 400. So I used to spend some time there, but more in the vicinity of his practice.
What native languages are spoken in your countries and can you speak any of them? Start with Kyle.
The native language spoken in my country that I know are Tagalog, but I cannot speak it and I can barely understand it. English is also very popular.
For me, there's obviously Arabic, but particularly for me, my parents grew up in a small little town, and they spoke a different language from Arabic, which is called Chaldean, also known as Aramaic. I could speak it, but I can't speak Arabic.
For me, when it comes to my countries, like Guyana and Jamaica, pretty much 2 countries that speak kind of broken English. There's also some Spanish, but it's little. I understand it, but don't really speak it.
Is it patois in both Guyana and Jamaica or just Jamaica?
No, just Jamaica. Jamaica's considered patois. Guyana is like another word for broken English in Guyanese.
Alrighty, Marcus.
For myself, my mother is fluent in Italian. My nonna, which would be my grandmother, so my mother's mother, speaks solely Italian, but I never really learned it until this year, where I started putting a bit more effort into understanding where I'm from. With my other side, which would be from St. Vincent, it's similar to Jamaica in a way. It's considered a dialect of English. I kind of know how to understand that a bit better because it's more similar to English, which would be like my primary language. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And do you know the name of that dialect?
Honestly, no. I think as Caribbean, you kind of just refer to it as patois. Like, I could be mistaken, but that's how I understand it.
Well, I was wondering if each of you could one by one go around and teach me a word in your language.
Okay, I'll start. Salamat in Tagalog means thank you.
Salamat.
Good, yeah, then.
Andrew, go ahead.
So you can just say like Shimmy and then your name, which is my name, and then you just include your name after that part.
Shimmy?
Yeah.
Shimmy.
And then
Did I say that right? Okay.
Yeah.
I guess for Jamaica, it would be like Wagwan or like Where you Dapan.
What's
Like,
Wudapan?
Where you Dapan? Meaning like,
Wudapan.
yeah, like what's going on? Like, what are you doing?
Okay.
Yeah.
And then for myself, I'm gonna go Italian. A word that I guess I kind of still carry to this day would be like bello. My nonna will call me bello. It means like nice. How I understood it, it's like, you know how some languages split up like female and male? Bella would be like the female version, bello would be like the male version. So I guess it's a term of endearment, and it means like nice.
All right. Well, to all of our listeners, you just learned 4 languages in 1 minute. That was a speed run. Okay. For each of you guys, did you all immigrate here? Were you born here? Did your parents immigrate here?
So I was born here. My mom moved to Canada when she was 19, and my dad was in his 30s when he moved here.
For myself, I was born here as well, but both my parents immigrated when they're around 18 or 19, I believe.
For me, I was born here. My mom immigrated here.
And for myself, I was born in Mississauga. Actually, my grandparents on my mom's side, they had emigrated to Italy shortly before my mother was born. And on my dad's side, they had moved first from St. Vincent to England. And then my father immigrated from England to Canada with his whole family when he was around 4.
So did all of you grow up initially feeling closer to your parents' culture, or do you feel like you were being raised Canadian or American right off the bat?
For me personally, I'm the eldest of 3 children, and I think my parents tried to merge both Canadian and Filipino culture when I was growing up, but they eventually just gave up. So I am very much detached from my roots.
Around what age would you say you feel like they stopped?
I want to say like maybe 4 or 5 years old. Once I started to get into school,
And then when you started school, did you feel like you were a Filipino kid that's in this Canadian school?
honestly, I wouldn't say that once I started school, I noticed any cultural differences between myself and the other kids. And also, it was a very diverse school growing up in Brampton as well.
What general demographic would you say lived in your neighborhood or went to your school?
It was very, very diverse. So I couldn't really say there was a majority demographic. My school was a Catholic school, so it was mostly kids from countries that are Christian, right? So Portuguese, Italian, Philippines, Ghanaians, Nigerians. Yeah.
All right, moving on to Andrew. Did you feel like you had to switch your culture when you started school, or were you raised Canadian?
Honestly, I'd say it's a mix because when I was younger, at least, I was so surrounded by my culture. I would always have family over or I'd be going to family events. So later on into my life, I would say once I detached from that, I became more antisocial. I would stop going to events and visiting family. So I'd say I kind of like grew out of that cultural phase in a way. I feel like when I went to school, I was more so in the Canadian phase and Canadian culture more than I was for my own personal culture.
And around what age did you feel that?
Probably like when high school first started.
Much older then. So are you saying that you basically felt you were from Iraq throughout until high school?
Not necessarily. Like when I was younger, I'd say it was a mix. So both my country and Canadian, because my parents would try their best to incorporate me in the culture. But I feel like I faded away from it as I grew.
Yeah, that's pretty common and relatable. What about you, KJ? What would you say?
I wouldn't say there was a great cultural impact in my life, to be honest. When it comes to where my mom's from, I don't feel like I was shown enough to be impacted. So it was never really an issue for me. I feel like I was more surrounded by Canadian culture instead of my international culture. The only times while I would be in that sort of environment is when I actually see family. For example, my cousins, my grandma. When I see them, that's when I get that cultural experience.
So when you meet your family, do you feel like you're not close enough to your parents' culture and you're too Canadian?
In a way, because I know that I wasn't shown that much culture growing up. So like when I see them, I feel that to a certain extent, honestly.
Yeah. Okay, what about you, Marcus? What would you say?
Because my parents grew up in Canada, I guess I could say it was more Canadian based, though they still promoted both of their cultures in a way. I think for me it's a bit different because I'm from two different places. So even for like my own identity, it was kind of confusing at times. But I guess I share like the same idea as like my friends in the sense that whenever I'm around family, it's more of a cultural environment. On my mom's side, they're speaking primarily Italian, and then with my dad, there's always some music or food that like reminds me that I'm not really Canadian in the traditional sense. There's still like heritage that's from other places, which I think is good. Also remember like being younger, I wanted to learn Italian just because whenever I'd go to my family's house, I'd hear it. But I guess my mom never really, or even my grandmother, she never really like took the time to teach me that. So that kind of made me feel disconnected from that culture in a sense too.
For sure. Would you say that you felt more Italian growing up or more from St. Vincent?
I would say it was a pretty even split, honestly, because I would see both sides of my family, at least growing up, pretty consistently. It was hard for me to really identify with one or the other, honestly. I knew I was from both places, but I also knew like I wasn't actually from either of those places, and I wasn't from Canada. So it was kind of like in the middle somewhere. I used to feel kind of confused about that, I remember as a child, but now not really.
What do you think made you change and realize that you don't have to feel confused about that anymore?
I think through diversity, really. As you can see, like my friend group's literally from all over the place. Knowing that people have their own identity and they just are proud in that, it made me just really accept both and just be 100% proud to be from both places and know that that's where my heritage is from. Like that can exist and I could also be Canadian and that can also exist. It was just like being comfortable in who I am. I think it was more of like a maturing thing, really. I wasn't really comfortable with myself, and then as I grew, that kind of changed.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you're teaching yourself Italian, so.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Kyle, with you, we got into the general demographic of what kind of communities you were growing up around, but I think I missed that with Andrew, KJ, and Marcus. So, jumping back to Andrew, what would you say were the general communities that people were from that you were raised around?
Can you just go over to KJ for a second?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, to be honest, to answer that question, I was around like growing up a wide variety of cultures. Like Kyle was saying, to expand on that, every single type of culture you can think of, like it was very diverse. I can't really say specific culture, but I'll say it's a wide variety.
Would you say that you felt like you were a minority in your community?
No,
So you had other people around you who were of like a similar background or
yeah,
similar
100%. Especially in high school, those early days, we were around like a lot of different cultures, and our friend group was diverse, just like now.
Andrew, you ready?
Yeah, so like back to what KJ and Kyle were saying, we all grew up around the same people because we literally have known each other since we were like kids. So all of us, I would say, we had a very diverse community around us, and like it was just mostly just different countries like Nigeria, Ghana, some Arab countries, a lot of Caribbeans. Just a very diverse community that we were brought up around.
Mm-hmm. And you said that you used to have family coming over a lot, so you definitely sound like you had a community that was from the same culture and background that you could grow up with. But what about in school? Did you feel like there were a lot of other Arabs or people from Iraq, or not so much?
Not at all, especially from the place that my parents are from. There's only like two people, and it was really rare to even see that. And I've known those two people since I was a kid as well, because we went to the same elementary school. There was a few Muslim people at our school, so you can tie it to like an Arab culture, but comparing it to where I'm from personally, then I wouldn't say it's the same.
And then in school, it sounds like, you found a friend group that was a pretty solid friend group right off the bat. But at any point, did you feel like there were people you were surrounded by who maybe didn't really understand your culture or your background, where you were from?
Not necessarily, no. I feel like everyone had like a good understanding of my background and everything. It just more so like the depths of it and actually understanding the history of it, they wouldn't understand. But like the basics, I would think they would understand it.
That's good to hear. Okay, Marcus, what about you?
I guess I can comment first on when I was in Mississauga. Specifically there, I guess maybe it was the area that I was in, but it was primarily white people. I guess I was aware of it, but I was too young to know where they're from, like how that would impact me growing up. And I moved relatively young as well. So when I moved to Brampton, I can comment on my neighborhood. It was actually very diverse. And I think that kind of carried on into school as well. A big part of that as well is related to soccer. We all grew up playing soccer too. And I think just naturally you see more minority groups participating in specifically soccer because it's an international sport. I think as a result of that, we were exposed to virtually like every culture, if not every culture, some representative from that part of the world, if that makes sense. So
Yeah,
I think that also contributes to like how we were brought up and why we're so open to diversity and like understanding other people's culture.
Yeah, for sure. And I didn't know you guys were all on a team together. That changes everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. That's how we all met.
So then you have this bond that's more than just friendship. And you guys have probably competed together too, right?
Oh
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. I see these guys like my brothers, honestly.
Yeah.
Like,
And,
this
like-
is really an understatement.
Yeah,
It's deeper than friendship for sure.
for sure. Like we've seen a lot, we've experienced a lot together. We've picked each other up out of a lot of things. And I think in that sense, like race never mattered. Like, I didn't see any of my brothers differently because they're from somewhere else.
I'm so glad to hear that. I mean, that's exactly the kind of stigma I'm trying to combat with this podcast too. So it's so great to hear that. You guys met in Brampton, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, yeah. So Brampton seems to have a really great community. I was actually talking to Anaya, who's Marcus's cousin. I don't know if you guys know.
What up,
Telling
cuz?
me- Yeah, she was telling me that Brampton was where she also felt like she was accepted. That was where she could find her people. Brampton is underrated. I mean,
That's it.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
It
grew up-
honestly is.
I grew up in Toronto, and I mean, you guys were always a joke. Everyone's like,
Mhm.
oh,
Yeah, yeah.
Brampton's full of waste men. Oh, like don't go there, this and that. But the more I'm hearing about it, the more I'm learning. It sounds like a much better place for diversity than here. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's Six Buzz for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Six
A lot
Buzz
of
definitely had
propaganda.
that stigma in Brampton.
For sure.
And just social media in general, to be honest.
Yeah, honestly though, I'd say Brampton's a lot different now than it was
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
for sure.
Immigration and
Yeah.
population.
Mhm.
Kyle, do you want to get a bit more into that? What was the change, and around when did you feel like it happened?
So I want to say maybe around 2018-19, there was a huge influx of immigration in Brampton, and now it's like a hub for South Asian immigrants. And I feel like it's actually crazy to say, but I feel more of a minority now than I did before.
Yeah. Literally,
100%.
yeah.
Back when there was true balance and diversity, and I want to say now that I'll walk down the street, there's like 95 maybe on average % South Asian people, and they kind of look at you different just because obviously you don't look like them, and it's quite strange because you're the ones that lived and grew up here your whole life.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm brown, and I feel like they look at me weird too. I'm like,
Mhm.
I thought we
Mhm.
were all from the same place. Never mind. Immigration definitely plays a huge role in Canada's society because
Yeah,
the whole country is basically built on immigrants.
for
And
sure.
For sure.
when there's so many immigrants coming in from one specific place,
Mhm.
we're so used to diversity, and then we suddenly feel like we're not seeing that diversity anymore.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Exactly. I think that before you used to see that type of immigration hubs in other places in the GTA. The one that comes to my mind first is Italian immigrants all living
Yeah.
in
In Vaughan.
Woodbridge or
Yeah.
Vaughan,
Yeah, Woodbridge Vaughan area.
and that's the parallel that I see with Brampton right now.
Yeah.
So maybe if I lived in Woodbridge or Vaughan, I would feel like more of a minority than how I do.
You guys all grew up basically feeling accepted in Brampton. That's what I'm getting. Your race never something that you felt discriminated against.
Oh yeah.
So
For sure.
was there a point in your life where you first experienced it, maybe when you were older? I'll move on to Andrew for this one.
So not me personally, honestly, but a story that I have from my mom that happened to her. So she was trying to get a job somewhere in Brampton. The people that were interviewing her said that she doesn't qualify for the job because she doesn't speak Punjabi, and she said that if you can't speak the language, then you can't work here. I guess like that's a sort of discrimination in a way, but it's an English spoken country, right? So I
Yeah,
feel like
for sure.
anyone that should be a Canadian citizen as well should be able to work wherever.
And did you actually need to know Punjabi for the job, or was it
No,
just-
no. It was just a regular minimum wage job.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's really sad to hear. I'm sorry your mom had to go through that. KJ, what about you?
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's like a specific point in time where I felt like I was being discriminated. For me, it's kind of like situations that I've been into where I can say, okay, yeah, this is discrimination. Honestly, you'll see it all the time, even in high school. Like, you'll see certain teachers treat you a certain way, maybe like mean mug you or like kind of toss you around verbally. Like, yeah, that happens all the time. For an example, I would say like maybe growing up in high school, teachers discriminating verbally, saying out of pocket things like slick comments, stuff like that. Yeah, 100% I experienced that a lot.
That's terrible, especially because you're a child,
Mhm.
guys. Do you know if those staff members ever got in trouble or if anyone called them out on that?
No, honestly. With like me personally, like, how I was raised, and if I'm going through something, I wouldn't go and reach out to external options. I'm gonna handle it like internally and by myself. So I was never the one to I'm being discriminated. Let me go reach out to somebody and get the situation handled. I'm sure I can speak for other people. They're similar like me, being discriminated against, kind of holding the situation in. I don't think like those teacher matters are ever resolved due to those facts.
That's a pretty common issue that I think a lot of schools, not just in Brampton, but here in general, have. Marcus, before we jump over to you, I was just wondering, the three of you, Kyle, Andrew, Marcus, did you guys witness this happening to KJ, and what were your thoughts or your feelings on that?
I'll start. I think that there was definitely some prejudice within some teachers towards African American students. Also, because our school was notorious for a lot of gang violence, crime. So, yeah, I definitely witnessed it. It was subtle. I wouldn't say it was blatant.
What about you? Were you a target of this, or do you feel like it was other communities?
No, I definitely think that it was other communities. Within the school system itself, I think that teachers have a prejudice towards Asian communities and they think that we're all like smart. That's a bias that they have. And I feel like I got away with a lot of stuff because of that, which sucks because of how unequally we're treated because of how we look, right?
Yeah. Marcus, what about you?
I guess I can kind of comment on the climate of our school. As Kyle kind of said, like we had our own problems with demographics. I think that was also in relation to just areas where people were placed and how some students were living and like the areas that were surrounding our school. So I wouldn't necessarily blame that as much on race as much as social economic status. In terms of like discrimination regarding race, I think one of the main problems was that you had a student population that was probably majority Black, whether that be Caribbean or African, and then you had a faculty that didn't like embody that same percentage nearly at all. Like maybe you had like a couple of Black teachers or like support staff that at least understood like you're able to relate to them, and they probably provided the most support and effective guidance for the community. In terms of myself, I kind of relate to Kyle in a way that I was placed in more academically inclined classes because school was something that I was like forced in a way by my parents to take seriously from a young age. So being in those classes, I probably didn't see as much discrimination because of like my academic status, I suppose, but still I knew that it existed. I know some teachers would look at you in a specific way because of even who you associate with, or just like, noticing that I'm a black kid myself. Like, they would just be like, not really double standards, but they kind of place you in a box based on the things that they see, which is in some sense fair to them because there's some problems that were going on. But at the same time, you can't categorize children that are really trying to put their best foot forward and do something productive for the world. Yeah, I guess I've seen both sides.
Do you guys feel like, oh no, I forgot my question. I got distracted by your answers. They were really, really good. By the way, you guys are like so well spoken. Like, I feel like I
Thank
have
you very
like
much.
minimal editing to do here.
Well, while you're figuring out your question, I just wanted to say that this is really fun so far, and
Yeah.
I think that your format is more question and answer, so it comes more across as like an interview than a podcast. So I was just curious about like your experience and what it was like for you growing up.
Oh my god, putting me on the spot.
What
Yeah,
a
you
turn in
definitely-
events. I like that.
I like that. Yeah. Let's hear about your perspective.
Okay, you guys, I mean, you're the first person who's asked me about my experience growing up. Kind of
Handing the
like-
mic over.
Handing the mic over. Yes, sir.
Alright, if you'd like to hear the rest of this episode, then stay tuned next week for part 2. Until then, check out our Spotify and our YouTube channel at Hand the Mic Over, and don't forget to check out our Instagram at Hand the Mic Over for pictures from today's episode. Thank you for listening!